Hello and welcome to the Politics Show on Sangat TV. As you may well be aware, we've got a general election on Thursday, the 8th of June. So please don't waste your vote, and as we're going around different MPs and seeing different party views, today we're interviewing James Bird and Eddie Hughes from the Conservative Party. Hello guys.
Hi.
Hello.
So can you tell me which constituencies you're standing in?
I'm Eddie Hughes and I'm Walsall North.
Okay,
James Bird, Walsall South.
Okay, so can you tell me the reason why you think you'll be good at your role and representing your constituency, and why do you think the Conservatives would be best for the UK overall?
If I begin, if that's
Yep.
okay. I think for me, I'm the son of a bus driver.
Yep.
So grew up in a family with 6 lads. We know what it's like to make ends meet.
Yep.
We're just about managing group, as Theresa May calls them. So I've had that sort of upbringing, but I went to a grammar school, and from there got a degree in civil engineering, first person in my family to go to university and get a degree.
Yep.
And now I'm privileged to be standing for the Conservative Party, so I think you can come from that background and do well for yourself.
And yourself, James?
So I'm a Midlander, so I think I share the values of my constituents in terms of hard work ethic, getting things done and doing what you say. I work in the communications industry, but I actually have a passion for the community, so giving something back, or the Punjabi word seva, making sure we give something back into the community. And I've done that, and I've stood and been a councillor before. And I have a real passion for improving education, and I think that's something that's really important for Walsall South. But also looking at loneliness and isolation amongst the elderly in Walsall. It's a real big problem, and I want to solve that. And making sure overall that actually the biggest thing that faces people over the next 5 years is Brexit. It's really a question of who's best to lead us through that negotiation. And I think it's Theresa May, and therefore I'm representing Theresa May in Walsall South to make sure that happens.
Well, can I ask you, what made you get into politics, guys? If you want to start with Eddie.
Just developed a bit of an interest at university, arguing with people who thought that we needed a bigger state and that the state could spend everybody else's money. I realised that actually that's not the best way. The best way is to leave people with their own money, keep taxes low, keep government small, get out of the way of businesses, let them get on with growing the economy and creating jobs.
Yourself, James?
I think from a young age I was always speaking out on issues and had an opinion on absolutely everything. And I kind of got to the point where I think if you have an opinion on everything, you need to do something about it. So I decided that I'd go into politics because I wanted to change things. And that's when I started looking at topical issues around education, what it was like in my area particularly, and how it should be improved. And then I decided to stand for council and to actually act on what I thought, really. So that's how I got involved.
Okay, great. So do you have a current job at present, or did you leave that to pursue politics?
I've still got a current job, or kind of.
Yep.
We left it for 5 weeks to do this. I'm the Assistant Chief Exec of a charity for homeless people in Birmingham.
Oh, brilliant.
So like Eddie, I currently work, although I've taken the campaign period off. So I'm a director of a communications company that employs 90 people across the UK. But I've previously had a political role as being a councillor, but worked alongside that as well.
So what do you think the Sikh community bring to the UK?
Well, from my own perspective, and going into Gurdwaras and speaking with people, what's quite clear to me is that many are entrepreneurs, many have small businesses in the area and are particularly involved in the community. So there's lots of community events and groups that Sikh people run. So that notion of seva, giving something back, and I run through the Gurdwaras. But I also think that beyond that, their values of digging in, getting things done, and being involved are really important. But overall, when you look at it, in terms of Sikh history and their service in the world wars, I think that's really important. And I think one of the things that strikes me, speaking in Gurdwaras a lot of the time, is some of the issues around making sure that there's more Sikh representation in Parliament are really important. But also in terms of having a Sikh regiment as well. Those are the issues that come up, and that's because it's that nature of wanting to be involved, I think.
Yeah, I remember the Sikh regiment. That was about 10, 15 years ago. Why didn't it go through? Was it under the Labour government that they stopped it, or?
Well, as I understand it, it's something that, and it's been spoken to me about, that actually, from an equality perspective, it wasn't seen as the right thing to do. But I know that for some people, it's seen as still quite a big issue. And it's something that I've been looking at with the Sikh community to see whether we could take it forward, because I know that, for instance, we have the Gurkha Regiment, and people referenced that to me when I was in the Gurdwaras, and that's something that perhaps we could look at.
I think a lot more Sikhs would join the army if we had our own. I know it seems, the multicultural, you're in Britain, but I think in the Indian Army, I think about 40% of soldiers are Sikh, and they only make 3% of the population.
Yeah.
So if they had their own regiment, it would be a big thing for us.
Yeah.
To serve the community, and it would be a good way forward. So, how is your party best placed to serve the Sikh community, would you say?
I think James has just explained a lot of the qualities that the Sikh community has, and they are aligned with the Conservative Party naturally in terms of being hard-working business people, strong on education. All of those qualities are exactly what the Conservative Party is about, and I think it's just becoming the case that we're getting together and getting into the Sikh community to explain Conservative values and what they are, and trying to drive up interest in our party.
So why do you think Sikhs mostly have always voted Labour? I remember when I was younger, they used to knock on our door and always say, the Labour are good for the Sikhs, Labour are good for you. Why do you think they've always pushed and fallen for the Labour Party?
Well, maybe to a degree that's the Conservative Party's fault for not getting out into those communities. But let's face it, we've moved a long way as a party. My understanding is that David Cameron was the first Prime Minister to visit the Golden Temple. So, and I think under his leadership, his premiership, we've had an increase in the number of Sikh schools in the UK. So I think we're finally starting to get our message across as a party and explain to Sikhs that we understand them, we understand their values. Also believe that David Cameron was the first person to celebrate Vaisakhi at Downing Street. Yeah. So slowly but surely, we're getting our message out there and developing a greater understanding of the Sikh community.
Okay, great. Another question I've got you, and it affects the Sikhs quite a lot, is when are we going to get a proper independent public inquiry into the UK government's role in the lead-up and the aftermath of the 1984 genocide?
Well, the first thing I would say is, after the general election, I'd like to believe that we're going to have a Conservative government. So if we have a Conservative government, then we need Conservative MPs who understand that situation and are prepared to push for that inquiry. So for James and I, as Conservative candidates in Walsall North and South, what we need first is a Conservative government, and then we'll be able to lobby on behalf of the Sikh community for that inquiry.
I mean, Labour are really pushing forward on that front. They've stated that they want to reopen the investigation, if they were to come into power. Will you properly follow this? Would you make a request to Theresa May, and will you just push that forward instead of just saying that you'll be able to?
I think that offer that they've made is cynical. If you look at any of the polls, nobody is suggesting that Jeremy Corbyn is going to be the Prime Minister, so he's throwing in these things as the days count down. His claims are just becoming more extravagant with the things he will do. He's not going to be the Prime Minister. Theresa May is going to be the Prime Minister, and having Conservative MPs lobbying on your behalf is what will make a difference.
But then Labour, in the Labour manifesto, they've got that written that they're going to reopen to look at the UK's role in the 1984.
Yeah, I say James and I are here as representatives. We're candidates when we're not the government. I'm not the Prime Minister, so we couldn't control what went into the manifesto. But I think there's a commitment from both of us to lobby on behalf of the Sikh community.
Do you think it is a fly move from the Labour Party putting that in at the end, especially pushing it now this week? And
I think the timing is very cynical. Very cynical.
So why did Theresa May call an election?
Well, she called an election because she needs a mandate, a good mandate, to go forward and negotiate the deal for Brexit. It's going to be a tough negotiation. From all accounts, the Germans are French are going to be tough negotiators, and we need someone there who's strong and got stable leadership to take us through that.
I've heard that before.
Yeah, but it's important because actually, in a negotiation, you need to have your best hand. So you need to ensure that people behind you are fully behind you. And the options on the table are Theresa May had a stronger, stable leadership, or the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn going into those negotiations propped up by the Lib Dems and SNP. And that would be a travesty because, frankly, Jeremy Corbyn doesn't have the support of his own MPs to go into that negotiation. It'd be a very weak hand for us indeed. And the effects of that are, if we don't get a good deal with Brexit, it will affect our economy and thus affect the local services, the provision of local services which are supported by the economy. So it's really important that we have that mandate so we can get the deal to support people.
I think James makes an excellent point there. David Winnick has been the MP in Walsall North for 38 years. 12 months ago, he was calling for Jeremy Corbyn to resign. So he doesn't even support his own leader.
Why do they not support him? That's the thing that doesn't get me there. Why are they not supporting Jeremy Corbyn, Labour MPs?
Jeremy Corbyn's idea of politics in terms of the left of the party is the extreme left. He's communist, effectively, and so he's trying to, I think, hijack the party and take it to the extreme left. And people realise that actually elections are won on the middle ground, and that's where most people operate. So if you want a party that's going to ever aspire to be the party of government, then it needs to have ideology that's aligned to the greater part of the population, and the Labour Party as it stands currently isn't.
See, the thing that's concerning me now, polls at the moment are saying it's getting closer and closer. And the worst case scenario, there could be a hung parliament. For Brexit, that'd be the worst ever possible scenario, where we've got Lib Dems and we've got Labour fighting on this side. What can people do, and what can you guys do to stop this from happening now?
I think James and I are battling hard every day, fighting for every vote, and ultimately that's going to come down to a very clear choice. Who do you want to be leading the government in those negotiations? As James said, the French and Germans are already lining up with a tough negotiating stance. We need to make sure that we work hard to get those votes so that we end up with James and I in Parliament, Theresa May as Prime Minister.
So what are the public saying when you're knocking on their doors and trying to push the Conservative policy, their manifesto through? Are they falling for Jeremy Corbyn's great manifesto, or?
Well, I mean, actually, what's interesting for me is that the polls don't reflect what people are saying on the doors. So when I'm knocking, it's been a really positive response. I think people recognise that the policies we're putting forward are practical policies. In some cases, people might not like them, but they recognise that Theresa May is there to make the tough decisions on things like social care. Whereas I think what we're hearing on the doorstep all the time is that Jeremy Corbyn might promise a lot, but the question is, one, can he deliver, and two, who will pay for it? So all these commitments around free tuition fees and the funding mechanism, nationalising the railways, nationalising lots of bodies. The question is, who's going to pay for it? And I think people realise that actually it will be them through higher tax.
I thought they've costed it all, Labour was saying.
They might have costed it all, but I think the IFS have also said that we're going to end up with a very high, one of the highest tax thresholds since in peacetime because of what Jeremy Corbyn is promising. So I think what's important with all of this is to recognise that we're not promising the earth and saying that somehow it's all free, because it isn't. You're going to end up paying for it in higher tax.
Okay, and another major point, in 2015 a lot of people voted Conservative because of your stance on immigration. But you said that you're going to have tens of thousands coming into the country, but in 2016, if I go over the figures, net migration was a massive 308,000 people. I mean, 133,000 were from inside the UK, which you're saying you couldn't do much about because of the open border, but a massive 175,000 were from outside the UK. Why could you not control your border? Because 308,000 is a massive amount coming in.
It is a massive amount, but the world has changed completely since the referendum. Britain has voted to exit the EU, and so that phrase, take back control of our borders, won't just apply to the interaction with other European countries. We won't be tied by the shackles of European legislation or agreements with other countries that are affiliated with the EU. We'll be free to determine ourselves who comes and goes from our country. Immigration will be controlled, and we'll be making sure that we bring in people to the country with professional qualifications that we need to keep our...
So you're saying again in the manifesto you're going to have tens of thousands. How are you going to achieve that clearly? Have you got your points? Is it a points-based system, or what is your policy on that?
I think that's to be determined.
Yeah.
We need to start the negotiations with the EU first, and then see how that pans out, and from there we'll be able to determine what the best policy is in terms of our relationship with the rest of the world.
So,
unless James hasn't.
Have you got? Yeah, carry on.
No. I mean, I completely agree with Eddie. From an immigration perspective, we have to go through the Brexit process. But one thing that Brexit will give us is control of our laws, and thus immigration policy. So, people have clearly voted for leave. A lot of their decision making was revolved around immigration, and the benefit of leaving the EU will be control of our own laws, and thus controlling immigration itself.
So, why are Labour having an open door policy? Because in their manifesto it's got no numbers written at all. Whenever I quiz the MP here, it's to be decided. They're saying that they're going to control it, but they've got no numbers, no figures.
I don't think James and I can help answer on behalf of the Labour
But
Party.
why are you guys not having the same philosophy of an open border?
Well, what we've said is that we'll have a fair system.
Yeah.
I think that's right. I mean, I think when we look at immigration, it must be beneficial to the UK, i.e. we want people that add value in terms of skills, etc. But I think we also recognise that there should be room for instance, asylum seekers, so those that are in desperate need.
Mm-hmm.
But that will be determined. Those are the broad themes I think that we look at. But it will be determined over the course of time. The real thing here is that people have asked for control of immigration, and only the Conservative government and Theresa May can deliver that through Brexit.
Okay. Can you tell me a bit more about your manifesto? Because the Conservative manifesto looks like nothing but cuts, but the Labour manifesto promises the world in every department: education, NHS, free childcare for 2-year-olds. Everything's being delivered in their manifesto.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's give you an example, I think, between the difference between the two parties in terms of philosophy. So with the NHS, currently we spend about £116 billion a year on the NHS. That's the same as the GDP of Croatia, or double the GDP of Luxembourg. So within an organisation like that, surely there is the opportunity for improving efficiencies. And for example, 10 million, I understand, missed doctor's appointments per year. If we can do something to improve the efficiency of the NHS, we don't necessarily need to continue to just chuck money at it constantly. Conservative Party are committed to spending a further £8 billion on the NHS, but more instinctively we need to improve the efficiency of it as well. And I don't think Labour ever see that as a solution to a problem. All they see is spend more money on it. Similarly with education, they're looking for more money to be spent on education, and yet we know that 1.8 million more children are in good standard schools for education than they were in 2010. So these things, the money isn't always the solution. You can have an innovative head teacher who can bring a new educational environment to a school, and that doesn't need money, that needs inspiration.
Yeah, just talk about education. One of your policies is to have more grammar schools, open new grammar schools. Why are Labour so against opening new grammar schools? Because from a Sikh point of view, a lot of Sikh parents want their kids to go to grammar schools, and they actually put as much time and effort and money into whatever they can do, even if they're from working backgrounds.
I went to Handsworth Grammar School, and I'm even wearing my Handsworth Grammar School cufflinks today. And obviously there would have been a number of Sikh families sending their kids to that school still, and at the time that I was there. So I think it's an aspirational thing. I think the Conservative Party thinks that if you work hard and you've got an academic interest, then you should be able to pursue that through education at a grammar school. Whereas the Labour Party see that as actually they just want to keep everybody down to a basic level, rather than allow those who have academic ability to move on. The Conservative Party appreciates not everybody is academically minded, and that's why we're growing the number of apprenticeships, so that people who are going to become plumbers or electricians or bricklayers can get on and do those important roles that we need. And grammar schools are the other side of that coin. Some people are academic, some people are practical. Let's make sure everybody has the best opportunity today.
Sure. On that front again, you were talking about everyone getting that chance, and for the hard-working people and some people that come from working backgrounds, like you were saying, you where you came from. What Conservatives are doing for them, such as the tax thresholds, etc. What are you giving to the working man? What incentives are you? Because people always look at the Conservative Party. Oh, their stuff. They're for the rich and they're stuck up and whatever. They don't do anything for the working man. But try and answer. What's your to the camera? Just explain what are you providing to the people that work, hard-working Sikhs that haven't really, that have got,
Well, I think the fundamental point is I look back to 2010 and see a lot of people that were unemployed. So judge us on our records. So since 2010, 2.8 million jobs have been created, and everyone needs a job fundamentally. Once you create those jobs, you need to ensure that people are able to have more money in their back pocket, which is why over the course since 2010 we've raised the personal allowance to £11,500, and we're seeking to raise that higher so that more people on average are taking more money home, £1,000 more for on average for every taxpayer. So that's what we're doing in terms of helping families. In terms of childcare, 3 or 4 year olds will get up to 30 hours free childcare per week. When you look at things like pupil premium for schools, Those disadvantaged children will get extra money to support their education. But all of this can only be funded with a solid economy. If you go back to 2008, 2009, 2010, the question was, how do we create more jobs so that people can take home the benefits of work? We've done that, we'll continue to do that. It's now making sure that people have the services off the back of the economy, and we improve those services in terms of the NHS and education.
Thanks. Can you explain the U-turn, the manifesto U-turn on the social care cap, on people paying for their own care? Why has it been removed, and do you think we should have to pay for our own care when we get elderly?
I think Theresa May described it as a clarification rather than a U-turn.
Okay.
For my part, I've been the Cabinet Member on Walsall Council for social care. I understand just how expensive it is, and if we're going to make sure that in the future elderly people, either who are receiving care in their own home or in residential accommodation, get the best care they can and real dignity in their own old age, that has to be paid for somehow. And I think this policy is an honest step towards addressing something that everybody appreciates as a problem. Nobody has had the guts to face up to. And let's face it, the threshold is increasing from £23,000 to £100,000. So we're going to be guaranteeing that parents are able to pass on at least £100,000 to their children. That seems like a very reasonable position to me.
I think is that threshold going to be raised again? They still haven't aligned the 100,000 threshold yet, have they?
No, the 100,000 is in the manifesto.
It's in the manifesto.
That's the figure. That's the minimum that you'll be able to retain.
Okay, great. Speaking on benefits, a lot of voters voted Conservative because you said you'd be strong in getting people out of work, into work, sorry, not out of work, and out of benefits and into work. I remember you introduced the benefit cap, which was £26,000 in 2010, and now in 2016 you've dropped it down to £20,000 outside London and £23 inside London after tax. Do you not still think that £20,000 after tax is still a lot for people to live on, especially when you've got families where both parents work full time, they're working as hard as they can to make meet ends, and do you not think it's still not strict enough and it should be lower than that for people that are struggling? People might be looking and saying £20,000, where people are.
I think actually our perspective would be slightly different. I think James has already explained the number of jobs that have been created since the Conservative government took over. People are better off when they are in work, and our aspiration should be to continue to grow the economy, create more jobs and get more people into employment. And as James has explained, a good Brexit deal will allow us to do that. It'll allow us the opportunity to trade more widely across the globe, and that will bring more jobs to the UK. So this question about whether the benefit cap is at the right level, actually let's focus on getting more people into employment, because we know if they're in employment, they're likely to be healthier. The whole of the economy benefits. That should be our direction of travel.
So why did Labour vote against the benefits cap in 2010, and even now 2016 they're making an uproar about it being £26,000 and now £20,000?
Instinctively they like to create that welfare dependency. For our party, we want people in work because actually that's better for them and for the economy as a whole. For the Labour Party, they like to create that dependency culture. They're happy for people to spend extended periods on benefits, and they're happy for those benefits to be paid by other hard-working people. We're trying to reverse that trend.
Another thing that Labour are winning points over, and youngsters as well, is they're going to scrap your tuition fees. UKIP are only going to scrap them.
Well, hang on a sec. Let's remember what happened to the last person who made a pledge on tuition fees. It was Nick Clegg, and clearly history tells us that ended badly. So Jeremy Corbyn, again, with regard to his cynical last-minute promises, is just throwing the kitchen sink at it, knowing actually that he's not going to be in a position to deliver any of these promises anyway.
I'd just add to that. I mean, as someone that's paid tuition fees, which were introduced by the Labour government, I actually think it's about responsibility, that when you go out of school and you have a decision whether to go into a job or university, that if you go to university, there is obviously, you're going to have to pay for that choice. And I was happy to do that. I took probably, from my background, the highest student loan you could get at that period of time. But the point was, I knew that when you got a job, you would pay it back incrementally based on the wage that you earn. Now, I've paid mine off, and over the period of time that I've worked, my wage has gone up, which is important. But the fundamental point is that it goes back to this dependency or responsibility, and people must take responsibility for their actions they take. So if you want to go to university, there are consequences with that. If you have a job, there's a consequence of paying tax. So for me, it's really important that people don't look towards a dependency culture, but actually take responsibility for their actions.
What are your policies on income tax? With Labour, it's going to be a massive rise.
Instinctively, the direction for the Conservative Party is to be low tax. We just appreciate that people spend their money much more wisely than governments do, so let's try to leave as much money in their pockets as possible. I think James was outlining previously a number of areas where we've sought to reduce tax levels.
Yeah, so the income tax threshold has risen. We're taking more people out of tax than ever before, and we'll continue to make sure that happens by raising the threshold once again by 2020. So instinctively we are low tax, and I think it's not only with individuals but also with businesses, in the sense of making sure that corporation tax is really low. We're looking to bring it down to 17%. Currently sits at 19%, and that will make businesses more competitive as well, which will employ more people who can go home, have lower tax, and enjoy the proceeds of what they go and work for.
So why would Theresa May make a better PM than Jeremy Corbyn? Because he's, at the moment, the media, even though they were saying maybe negative, it seems like he's getting on the rise now.
Jeremy Corbyn, as we discussed earlier, I think can't even lead his own party. He's had a number of people who have refused to be on his shadow front bench, people who won't even sit in his team within his party. For my position, David Winnick in Walsall North this time last year was in the Express and Star calling for the resignation of his own leader. So if he can't even manage to lead his own party, how on earth can he lead the country?
So for the voters now here and the Sangat that is watching, what do you think the future would be like now if Labour got into power come June the 9th?
Well, I think the phrase that the Conservative Party have been using is the coalition of chaos, and the reason that we see that to be true is because the SNP are lining up to support him, the Lib Dems will be supporting him, and as I said, if he can't even lead his own party, imagine how difficult it would be trying to lead a coalition of 3 or maybe 4 other parties. That would be chaotic and disastrous for the country.
Okay. Another question now, whether you voted Leave or Remain, Brexit's going to happen, we've got to carry on with this. What opportunities do you see post-Brexit without all the media attention that it's going to be such negativity?
Well, just firstly, can I say, in Walsall North, 68% of people voted Leave, but in polling subsequently, Walsall North is the second most comfortable constituency with that decision. So regardless of whether you voted Leave or Remain, the constituency as a whole is the second most comfortable in the country with it. People have realised the vote has been taken, let's just move on and make the best deal
But then
of it.
whenever I discuss with Labour or Lib Dem MPs, they both say that the public were lied to and they want a second referendum.
Maybe they were lied to or misled equally by both parts. The point is, the decision has been made and we really need to make a good deal for the country now. Theresa May is the person to do that. Jeremy Corbyn is clearly not capable of leading anything.
So how is the campaign going along for yourselves? etc.
Well, I think James said, I think we've both been talking about this, and knocking doors, the response is really positive. People fundamentally want to talk about Brexit and making a success of that, or the leadership of the parties. It's going to come down to a really simple choice. Only Jeremy Corbyn or Theresa May can be the Prime Minister on June the 9th. It's that clear cut. And I think that sort of clarity is coming home to people, and even long-term Labour voters are realising that Jeremy Corbyn would be the wrong man for what the country needs at the moment.
So have the polls got it wrong, do you reckon? Or?
The only poll there is the election night, when we get the results. But actually I think that when I'm out on the doorstep, I get a really positive response. And I think the most important thing for Walsall South is they're seeing someone that's visible on their doorstep and hearing from someone who's local as well. And that goes down really well, beside the national issues around Brexit and the economy.
Okay, great. So what do you think your campaign needs now to get it back on track?
The campaign is on track. Well, it doesn't need anything.
Well, the leads dropped with the change on social.
Well, I think if you say, do we believe the polls, it was always going to be unrealistic for the Conservative Party to sustain a 22-point lead in the polls during the campaign. That clearly those things were unrealistic. That would have had us with a majority of well over 100. and never likely to be the case. So I think what we're seeing now is the polls settling, and I think the Conservative Party have had a fairly consistent lead of around about 10 points. I'd be more than happy to see that continue into election day.
Yeah, polls go up and down, but I think that the point for most people is on the day when they go to the polling booth, they'll be thinking about what's in the interest of their family, thinking what's the interest of themselves in terms of how much money they can take home, and what's the interest of the country. And when they look at Brexit, when they look at income tax and all the things that affect them, I think they'll be looking towards a strong leader as opposed to a weak one. And that will be Theresa May as a strong leader.
Thanks a lot. So I think our time's coming up to an end now, James and Eddie. But I'd like to give you a chance of summarising why do you think you should get in power and why do you think the Conservatives should get in power?
For me personally, we've had an MP, a Labour MP in Walsall North who's been there for 38 years. What we really need now is change. We need change in terms of a new person with fresh ideas, new energy, who is aligned to the thinking of that constituency. I voted for and campaigned for Brexit. David Winnick voted against it. It's time for somebody to really represent those people, and I'm the man for the job.
James?
I think when people go to the polls, there's a big choice in Walsall to make. They can sit with someone who's not visible as their local MP, who's not a strong voice in Parliament, or they can look to someone who's younger, fresher, but has experience to go out there and fight the cause for them locally at a national level. Working with Andy Street as the new mayor, but also Theresa May. And I think most Walsall people on the doorstep are considering that making sure the economy continues to improve, which will fund local services so we can support the local schools in our area and vitally support Manor Hospital. So that's what people will be looking at towards when they go to the general election. And as their Conservative candidate, I will be putting forward and standing up for Walsall residents with not only Theresa May and Andy Street, but also making sure that we get that investment that we need going forward.
Thank you. Thank you for your times, James and Eddie. And please do not waste your vote. Remember to vote come Thursday, the 8th of June. And thank you for watching the Politics Show on Sangat TV.